Most car people think the horsepower ceiling for a street-legal build sits somewhere around 1,500, maybe 2,000 if you're generous and you're counting drag-only cars that can't turn a corner. Then, a quad-turbo V16 dyno session leaked online and the number became 5,000. Not a typo. 5,000 horsepower from a car that technically has license plates. And the gap between the bottom of this list and the top isn't linear. It's exponential. These are the 10 highest horsepower modified cars ever built. What they actually are, and the engineering insanity nobody puts in the headline. Number 10, Sheepey Race Audi R8 Twin Turbo. 1,700 horsepower. Built by Sheepey Race out of the US. Fully built 5.2-liter V10, Motec EKanoo twin turbo conversion. Here's the part most people skip past. This car is still street registered. It still has insurance. It still passes whatever inspection Sheepey's state requires. And it has nearly triple the factory output of the car it started life as. Here's why that matters. Every car above this one on the list sacrifices something to hit its number. Daily usability, a passenger seat, sometimes the ability to legally exist on a public road. The Sheepey R8 doesn't. You could drive it to get groceries. You could also use it to humiliate a Lamborghini at a stoplight. Same car. Who builds something like this? A shop that understood the assignment was never build the most horsepower, and it was build the most horsepower someone can still drive on a Tuesday. Number 9. Hennessey Venom GT, 1,800 horsepower. Builder, Hennessey Performance Engineering, USA. Lotus Exige chassis, 7.0-liter twin-turbo V8. Officially clocked at 270 miles per hour. This is the car that proved the entire category was viable. Before the Venom GT, 1,000-plus horsepower production-based supercar wasn't really a thing manufacturers chased seriously. Hennessey took a British lightweight chassis, the Exige, and essentially asked what happens if you bolt a fighter jet amount of torque into something that weighs almost nothing. The answer was 270 miles per hour, and a number that, at the time, made Bugatti's engineers take notice. This car is the reason every car below it on this list exists at all. Without the Venom GT setting the precedent that small American shops could out-engineer the supercar establishment, half this list doesn't get built. Number 8. AMS Performance Alpha Omega GTR, 2,000 horsepower. Builder, AMS Performance, USA. Here's the detail that gets buried. This wasn't a one-off show car. This was a shop car, meaning AMS built it to demonstrate what their own parts catalog could do and then used it to repeatedly break GTR quarter-mile and roll racing records around the world. Not once. Repeatedly. Think about what that means for reliability. A drag car that runs once and breaks is a stunt. A drag car that runs over and over, gets driven to events, gets raced against rivals globally, and keeps winning. That's an engineering platform, not a publicity build. The Alpha Omega is one of the earliest cars to prove the Nissan GTR's stock block could survive 2,000 horsepower without grenading. Every GTR tuner that came after owes this car a debt they don't usually mention. Number 7. Toyota Land Speed Cruiser, 2,000 horsepower. Builder, Toyota Racing Development, USA. This is the strangest entry on the list and also the most important one to understand correctly. A twin-turbo 5.7-liter V8 in a Land Cruiser, not a sports car, an SUV. The same vehicle platform families use to drive their kids to school set a world SUV speed record at 230 miles per hour. TRD didn't build this to sell anyone anything. There's no production version coming. They built it to prove a point about reliability and engineering margin, that the platform underneath millions of family SUVs had that much untapped capability sitting dormant the whole time. It's the only car on this list built purely as a flex of corporate engineering capability rather than a business or a record attempt for its own sake. Number 6. EKanoo Racing Toyota Supra, 2,500 horsepower. Builder, EKanoo Racing, Bahrain. The legendary 2JZ-GTE block, the engine that built half the tuning culture of the late 90s and 2000s, pushed to 2,500 horsepower with a precision turbo setup that dwarfs anything the engine was ever designed around. Quarter-mile times in the low 6-second range. Here's the context most viewers miss. The 2JZ is famous specifically because of how much abuse the stock block can absorb before it fails. EKanoo didn't just bolt on bigger turbos. They spent years finding the actual ceiling of an engine that the entire drag racing world assumed already had a ceiling, and kept finding there wasn't one. Bahrain isn't exactly the country you'd guess produces a world-class drag team, campaigning a Japanese engine platform against American and British rivals. And yet, here they are, near the top of a global list. Number 5. Underground Racing Lamborghini Gallardo TT, 2,300 horsepower. Builder, Underground Racing, USA. Built 5.2-liter V10 twin-turbo race-grade transmission, capable of 250-plus miles per hour highway runs. Read that again. Highway runs. Not a closed course, not a sanctioned track event with a long enough straight and a safety crew standing by. A public highway. This is where the list stops being about drag strip numbers and starts being about something closer to recklessness dressed up as engineering. Underground racing has built a reputation specifically on twin-turbo Lamborghini platforms that can survive sustained high-speed running, not just a quarter-mile burst. The fact that this car can hold 250 miles per hour on an open road rather than just hit a peak number once under controlled conditions is the detail that separates it from half the builds above it in raw horsepower but below it in actual capability. Number 4. Ford GT, 2,700 horsepower. Builder, Performance Power Racing, USA. Twin-turbo 5.4-liter V8, twin 76mm turbos, custom aero. Topped 310 miles per hour and broke the standing mile record. The standing mile isn't a quarter-mile sprint. It's a full mile from a dead stop, which means this car had to hold structural and aerodynamic stability at over 300 miles per hour for an extended duration, not just survive a few violent seconds. The Ford GT platform was already one of the most aerodynamically refined production chassis Ford ever built. Performance Power Racing essentially asked what happens if you stop treating the aero as a styling exercise and start treating it as a literal life support system at 300 plus miles per hour. The answer is a standing mile record that most hypercar manufacturers with infinitely larger R&D budgets have never come close to touching. Number 3. Red Victor 3, 3,000 horsepower. Builder, Andy Frost, UK. Here's the detail that should stop you. The donor car is a 1972 Vauxhall Vice X4/90, a 50-plus-year-old British saloon car, the kind of thing your grandfather might have driven to the pub. Underneath it now sits a twin-turbo 9.8-liter V8, making up to 3,000 horsepower, and the car is street-registered in the UK, running sub-7-second quarter miles. This is the entry that best captures the entire spirit of the British drag racing scene. That the most insane horsepower per pound projects in the world don't always come from billion-dollar manufacturers. Sometimes they come from one man with a vintage shell and a refusal to accept that 3,000 horsepower in a vehicle registration document are mutually exclusive things. Number 2. ETS Nissan GTR, 3,046 horsepower. Builder, Extreme Turbo Systems, USA. A 4.1-liter stroker, VR38, twin 76mm turbos, sequential gearbox, all-wheel drive. Claimed over 3,000 horsepower at the wheels, not at the crank, which is the number that actually matters because wheel horsepower accounts for drivetrain loss. Quarter-mile times in the 6-second range. This is widely considered one of the most complete high-horsepower GTR builds ever assembled because ETS didn't just chase a peak dyno number. They built an entire drivetrain, from the stroker engine internals to the sequential transmission, capable of actually transmitting that power to pavement repeatedly without disintegrating. A 3,000 horsepower engine is an impressive dyno sheet. A 3,000 horsepower car that runs consistent 6-second passes is a Wancheng platform. ETS built the platform. Number 1. Devel 16 prototype. 5,000 horsepower, claimed. Builder, Devel Motors with Steve Morris engines. A quad-turbo 12.3-liter V16. Read the displacement again. 12.3 liters. That's larger than most truck engines, configured as 16 cylinders, with 4 turbochargers feeding it. Dyno testing has reportedly shown over 5,000 horsepower, though the car remains in development and has never been independently verified at that figure in a finished, production-ready vehicle. Here's why it still earns the top spot, despite the asterisk next to it. Nothing else on this list is in the same numerical universe. The closest competitor, the ETS GTR, sits at roughly 3,000 horsepower. Devel's claimed figure isn't 20% higher. It's not 50% higher. It's nearly double the next car on this entire list. Steve Morris Engines, the shop handling the powertrain, has a documented history of building genuinely functional, absurd displacement engines for serious clients, which is the only reason the claim gets taken seriously instead of dismissed as marketing theater. Whether the finished car ever ships in a form that matches the dyno number is still an open question. But as a statement of what's mechanically possible when displacement, boost, and ambition all get pushed to their absolute limit simultaneously, nothing else here comes close. What this list actually proves: the Sheepey R8 and the Devel 16 are doing the same thing, just at wildly different scales. They're both proof that the factory horsepower number stamped on a car from the manufacturer was never the ceiling. It was just the number the engineer stopped at because they had a business case to protect, a warranty to honor, and a customer base that didn't need 3,000 horsepower to get to work. Every car on this list exists because someone looked at that factory number and treated it as a starting point instead of a limit. If this was useful, subscribe. I break down how things actually work, not how the spec sheet describes them. See you in the next one.